Sculpt Nouveau Copper B metal coating application with light green patina. We're going to apply the copper B metal coating with a basic light green patina to a resin architectural piece. Here we have a cast polyurethane resin piece that's been primed with regular auto body primer. Now this primer is actually sprayed into the mold. Here we have the basic resin, and then on the right hand side we have the primered resin piece. Anytime you're trying a new primer application, it's always a good idea to make sure to test your primer first to make sure you get a very good bond between your primer and your resin surface. Now we're going to mix up our metal coating. Now this is copper B, and with all the metal coatings they contain heavy metal powder, so it's a good idea to shake them up really good before you start application. Also, we're using a disposable chip brush, and one of the unfortunate things about cheap brushes is the bristles come out, so we want to make sure we get those bristles out first before we start applying the metal coating. Any loose bristles can get stuck in the metal coating and obscure our surface, so we want to make sure we get those out before we start brushing this onto the surface of our piece. Now when we apply the metal coating with a brush like this, if we just brush it onto the surface, we'll wind up with a lot of little brush stroke lines that give away the fact that we brushed on this metal coating, and it'll give away the fact that this is a paint rather than something intrinsic to the actual resin piece here. So what we want to do is apply uniform coating of our metal coating all over the piece, and once we've applied that, we want to come back and obscure those brush lines. Now you don't have to do this if you spray on the metal coating. You can always spray this with an HVLP sprayer or some other kind of sprayer, and that'll of course give you a nice uniform surface finish, but a lot of us don't have that capability on all the pieces we might work on. So here's a little trick you can do. When you brush this on, once you get that entire surface coated, you can come back with your chip brush and dab that surface to obscure those brush stroke lines. And that accomplishes two things. When we start dabbing it like this, we get rid of the brush strokes, but it also gives us a nice texture that increases the surface area and gives our patina a lot of surface area to react with. And you'll see that in a minute when we spray on our light green patina. Now, when you're using these metal coatings, it's a good idea to do two coatings. So we want two applications. We do the first layer that makes sure that we get total coverage on our piece, and then we apply a second layer, and that'll be the layer that we actually apply the patina to. So we want to get our piece completely covered and allow that to dry before we proceed to our second coating that will then have our patina. Now we've got a dry coating, and keep in mind your dry time is always going to depend on your work environment. If you're in a dry climate, a warm dry area, your piece is going to dry a lot faster than obviously a cold wet climate. So keep in mind dry times are going to be typical of acrylic or oil paints. Now with our second coat, we want to follow the same steps as the first coat. We're going to brush that coat on over the entire surface and then come back and stipple that surface with the brush to remove those lines and give it that hammered metal look. Now keep in mind here I'm using the most expedient method possible, which is just stippling with a brush to get these brush strokes out and get my surface texture. But you can be a lot more creative with this using a roller or a natural sponge stippled over the surface to break up that the brush strokes and give you a textured surface that way. But one of the things I found is by stippling that surface, you increase that surface area and you just get a much richer reaction with your patina when it's sprayed on. Now here we're finishing up stippling the second layer, and the critical thing with using the metal coatings with patinas is to apply the patina while the metal coating is wet. If you allow it to dry, you're not going to get a very good reaction. Now the light green patina in the 8-ounce bottle sizes of all the Sculpt Nouveau patinas come with a little pump sprayer. And this is a convenient way to apply the patina, but keep in mind you can always transfer this into a regular traditional spray bottle if you need a different spray pattern. Now as soon as we spray this on, now I did this in a fairly humid environment, and you'll notice that we're already getting a reaction just minutes after the spray application there. And a few minutes later we're already seeing the greens develop, And this was after about 20 minutes. We got a really good reaction. And you notice that light green starts to really change in about 30 or 45 minutes. Now you'll notice that even after your B coating has dried, your patina will continue to develop and continue to change color a little bit. Now once the metal coating is dry, at any point there you can clear coat that with either the Smart Coat or the Permalac to preserve that finish.